AP 120, Chapter 15, Topics: Large Intestine, Carbohydrates, and Lipids. All right, the large intestine is wider than the small intestine, and it absorbs water and electrolytes. It also forms and stores feces and is approximately 1.5 meters long, which is, I think, about 4.5, 5 feet long. So, the large intestine has many regions with different names. The first compartment of the large intestine is called the cecum. Cecum is relatively small, comes directly after the ileocecal sphincter. And hanging off the cecum is this small little structure called the appendix. The cecum, the feces in the cecum would then move up the ascending colon, cross via the transverse colon, down on the left side via the descending colon, go through an S-shaped curve called the sigmoid colon, and then the feces will be stored in the rectum until it is released through the anal canal and out the anus. Here's a close-up of the rectum and the anal canal. Turns out the anus is composed of two sphincters: an external anal sphincter made of skeletal muscle tissue, which we voluntarily control, and then an internal anal sphincter made up of smooth muscle tissue that we do not control consciously. So the layers of the wall of the large intestine are relatively as expected. The mucosa is a little different. It's a little thicker, and it has these little invaginations, basically intestinal glands that produce fluid and mucus to keep the feces moist and able to move along. But overall, it is flat, and of course has many goblet cells, lots of mucus produced by the lining of the large intestine to help lubricate and allow the feces to move along. The large intestine also has this smooth muscle tissue that goes along the length of the large intestine. This structure is called the tinea coli, and the tinea coli contracts slightly, and by doing that, it bunches up the large intestine, forming these little pouches, and these pouches are called one haustrum, one pouch, one haustrum, or many haustra. Again, functions of the large intestine: secrete mucus to provide lubrication for the feces, absorb electrolytes and water, house important bacteria. We have some very important bacteria living in the large intestine. Some of them synthesize vitamins, such as vitamin K and some of the B vitamins. And some of them are just there to crowd out pathogens, so that there's no space for a pathogenic bacteria to grow. Movement of the feces, another important function. This occurs via peristalsis, moving the feces slowly from haustrum to haustrum. And then occasionally there are peristaltic waves. These are mass movements that move the feces really quickly toward the rectum. And these occur about 2 to 3 times per day. And then, of course, the final movement is defecation, the expulsion of feces from the rectum. Now, feces is the undigested material of the food we eat, so whatever is left over that we couldn't break down. Also some water, some electrolytes, definitely mucus, shedded intestinal cells from the lining of the large intestine, and of course bacteria. And the color and odor of feces is due to bacteria. And as you can see, we have this lovely chart looking at the quality of feces from type 1, which is someone super constipated, to type 7, where someone is super diuretic, suffering from diarrhea. You want to poop like a champ? Drink lots of water, eat more fiber, limit caffeine, exercise. Exercise is always good for you. Some of the disorders associated with the large intestine include diarrhea, which is an increase in frequency, volume, and fluid content of feces. Then there's constipation. Constipation is infrequent or difficult defecation. Basically, the large intestine is less active. And as the feces spends more time in the large intestine, it becomes harder and drier. And then colorectal cancer. Here's a malignant tumor in the colon. Colorectal cancer can be extremely deadly, which is why when you get to a certain age, you will get regular colonoscopies to try to detect polyps, which are precancerous growths, and to get rid of those polyps. Nutrition. We eat in order to get the nutrients our body needs to use. And so nutrients are the chemicals supplied by the environment. There are macronutrients, we talked about before, carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, water. Nucleic acids, although for some reason that never seems to make the list. So these are macronutrients, things we need in large amounts: carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, water, and nucleic acids. And often we talk about food in terms of how much energy it has, and energy is expressed in calories. And a calorie is energy needed to heat 1 gram of water by 1 degree. You don't actually have to remember that. And then there are micronutrients, things we need in small amount, and these are the things we call vitamins and minerals. Essential nutrients, another category of nutrients, are things that we cannot synthesize in our bodies. This will include water, vitamins, minerals, carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, nucleic acids. Obviously, we can convert some of these macro molecules into each other, but still we need at least some of them, so they are essential. Carbohydrates. As we know, carbohydrates are a great source of immediate energy. Carbohydrates we eat hopefully as complex carbohydrates, which would be long chains of monosaccharides. And then those long chains get broken down into disaccharides, and then finally the monosaccharides that we can absorb: glucose, fructose, galactose. Glucose being, of course, the most important monosaccharide because it's what our cells use to produce ATP. Now, cellulose is something else we eat when we eat plant matter, and cellulose is a complex carbohydrate that we cannot digest. Even though it's only a long chain of glucose, it is chemically arranged in such a way that we cannot break down cellulose. So instead, cellulose is basically fiber, and it helps to facilitate the movement of chyme through the intestine, especially the large intestine. So monosaccharides are absorbed in the form of fructose, galactose, and glucose. They pass through the lining of the small intestine, enter the bloodstream, go to the liver, where the liver will pull them out and convert fructose and galactose into glucose, because again, glucose is the workhorse monosaccharide of the body. Excess glucose is stored in the form of glycogen, which is a long branching molecule made up of thousands and thousands of glucose molecules. Or glucose can get converted into fat. And then the liver is going to be releasing glucose constantly because our body needs lots of glucose all the time, especially the brain. The brain needs huge amounts of glucose to make energy so the neurons can function properly. If glucose gets scarce, then the liver can turn amino acids into glucose. This produces urea and a nitrogenous waste that goes into the bloodstream and ends up in the kidneys and urine. Also, the liver can make ribose and deoxyribose in case we need those for nucleic acids. Carbohydrates, you should eat apparently 125 to 175 grams daily. Eat too much and then you could end up building up excess fat. Don't eat enough and you end up with having to break down proteins and amino acids to get those carbohydrates. Lipids. Lipids are the fats. As we know, they're hydrophobic. They are great for storing energy, and they are used for some cellular processes and cellular structures. And in our foods we eat, the most common form is triglycerides, one glycerol molecule attached to 3 fatty acid chains. So, lipids includes fats, oils, phospholipids, and cholesterol. Saturated fats usually come from some sort of animal origin. Saturated fats have no carbon-carbon double bonds. And often saturated fats also travel in the company of cholesterol. Here's cholesterol, that lovely ringed lipid structure. And then unsaturated fats, unsaturated fatty acid chains, are found primarily in the oils that come from plants. And they're unsaturated because there is a carbon-carbon double bond, maybe two, in the fatty acid. Again, triglycerides gets broken down into 3 fatty acids and a glycerol. The liver, being very metabolically active, can convert fatty acids into other kinds of fatty acids, except for the 2 essential fatty acids. And that's the omega-6 and the omega-3s, also known as linoleic acid and linolemic acid. So omega-6, omega-3s are the fatty acids that are essential, that we have to eat because our liver cannot make it. And of course, the liver also produces cholesterol. It also regulates the levels of cholesterol and lipids in the body, in the bloodstream, and the liver also excretes bile. And then if you consume a lot of fats, the excess of triglycerides will get stored in adipose tissue, in the fatty tissue of the body. All right. So this between the liver and the adipose tissue, these structures control triglyceride metabolism. All right, triglycerides in the alimentary canal. So you ate a fatty meal. You now have triglycerides in the chyme, in the small intestine. They undergo hydrolysis, becoming 3 fatty acids and a glycerol. They get transported through the lining in the form of chylomicrons and into the lymphatic system of the lacteals, and then eventually to the bloodstream. So again, fatty acids are able to enter the citric acid cycle. So you can see different points along the citric acid cycle. Fatty acids can enter it and be used to make ATP. So can get involved in cellular respiration and the production of ATP. Glycerol can also enter the citric acid cycle or be converted into glucose. So again, the triglycerides, the fats and lipids can be used to produce ATP, to produce energy. Liver controls circulating lipids. Liver synthesizes many triglycerides, phospholipids, and lipoproteins. The liver, as we know, produces very low density lipoproteins, which are proteins surrounding triglycerides and cholesterol. They go to the tissues, deliver the triglycerides to muscle tissue and adipose tissue. And then the VLDLs become LDLs, and the LDLs will continue traveling to the various tissues, delivering cholesterol to the tissues. And then any remaining proteins go back to the liver. The liver also produces high-density lipoproteins, so it produces the high-density protein part that goes out to the tissues, and then the high-density lipoproteins collect the cholesterol. So the HDLs collect cholesterol from the tissues and return it to the liver, which then sends the cholesterol out into the bile. Oops, I answered the question. Secreted in bile. So excess cholesterol is secreted in bile. Lipids come from a lot of different foods. It's good to have a diverse makeup of foods. And lipid intake should not exceed 30% of your total calories in the form of dairy, meats and poultry, and just fats and oils in general. And that is it for this part of Chapter 15.